very honored to be with you here today, to bear witness and to mourn and mark and never forget the genocide that occurred in the massacres of the Tamil population. We remain, but it's still very fresh, right? It's not that long ago. And we know that we have welcomed to Canada an extraordinarily talented, vibrant, and generous population of Tamil Canadians. We want to mark this day and remember to mark it every year. I'm very pleased to be here with so many of my colleagues from every other party in the Canadian Parliament. Thank you for including me, and thank you to your beautiful young people for opening us with O Canada and with that beautiful song of your heritage. I appreciate it enormously, and I'm looking at the photographs before us, and it is very hard to look at the pain and the loss of life that you have put together in these posters. We will not forget, and we will mark a genocide and say, as we do all too often, never again. Thank you.
On Tony Clement, who's a Conservative MP for Parry Sound and Muskoka.
Thank you. It's my great honor to be with you to mark this solemn occasion, Tamil Genocide Remembrance Day. Today, we're reminded of the Civil War that raged for nearly 3 decades and the horrible atrocities committed against tens of thousands of innocent civilians who were hopelessly caught in the middle. And so let us offer our prayers for all the souls senselessly lost, for all those families who were affected by the genocide, and for all those who remain impacted by this ongoing struggle. And it is an ongoing struggle. To this day, there are innocent people still facing oppression at the hands of elements in the society or the government. It's also important that we take the time to reflect on the thriving Tamil community here in Canada and the importance that it plays for the cultural and economic fabric of our great nation. We also want to recognize the tireless work of the National Council of Canadian Tamils in advocating for human rights wherever oppression rears its head. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you this evening, and God bless you all. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to call upon Honorable MP Gary Anandasangri, currently a Liberal Member of Parliament for Scarborough Rouge Park, and he's a wonderful advocate for our community. He's also a really good friend of mine.
Thank you. I'm joined by a number of my colleagues, Anthony Housefather, Judy Scrow, Kamal Kara, and Raj Graywell, as well as our Parliamentary Secretary, Marco Mendocino. I want to first acknowledge that we're standing and gathering here on the traditional lands of the Algonquin people. As a people who have lost a great deal over the last almost 65 years of oppression under the Sri Lankan state, we can appreciate what a loss of land is for Indigenous people. So I always like to start with that. This is a day that we mark the end of war in Sri Lanka, but also the genocide that took place and that continues to take place on the island against the Tamil people. I remember coming here since 1984, and virtually every few months we would come here, we would gather here, we would protest, we would ask for help. And over the years, what we saw was a complete deterioration of the situation in Sri Lanka to the height in 2009, where we saw 40,000 people slaughtered in the last days of the war. One of the things that we're doing and we've been committed to from day one is to make sure that those who committed the crimes, those who committed the war crimes, the crimes against humanity, and those who are committing the genocide are held to account. And that is a process that we've undertaken with the UN Human Rights Council. I know for the last 8 years, many of you in this gathering have been involved in it, and it's a very frustrating process. But it's a process that has given us some space for democratic change on the island. And I can give you a couple of examples where that's opened up. For example, Kapapalavu, where the people who were trying to get back to the land, I was able to visit the island in July, and I saw people who were struggling to get back into their land. They were fighting, they were demonstrating, they were protesting, and today we see more and more of that space opening up for those people, and we see small openings of that happening. But we know that we haven't progressed much in the last 8 years. We haven't seen movement on accountability. We haven't seen movement on land release. We haven't seen the military go down in any measurable way. The military continues to be a major force on the island, and they continue to dominate many areas of Tamil-controlled land, and they continue to keep the people in fear. There are a number of people who are held in detention. I think well over 200 people who are being held under the Prevention of Terrorism Act. That continues to cause a great deal of strife for those families who are struggling. And there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who have basically handed over their loved ones to the army in the last days, who are still looking for answers. And I can give you just one example. I met with 2 women in Mullaitivu who were wearing pottus. Pottu is a sign of marriage in the Tamil culture. And we started to have a conversation about what happened to their husbands, that they surrendered on the second last day before the war. And to be honest, I couldn't look in their face and tell them that they may not be coming back, because these are people who are believing every single day that their loved ones are going to come back. And these people need answers. All of us need answers. Many of us have loved ones we've lost, and it's something that all of us in this group and my colleagues here from all the other parties, we're committed to making sure that justice will prevail one day for the people, for the Tamil people on the island of Sri Lanka, and together we will walk towards that march.
I just want to say that welcome to Ottawa, and as we mark this solemn occasion, that truth and reconciliation has been of great benefit to the Government of Canada and the Canadian people, and it will be to Sri Lanka as well. But in order for truth and reconciliation to occur, we have to recognize the atrocity for what it is, a crime against humanity and genocide. 40,000 innocent lives were lost just in the last couple of months of a 26-year civil war. And that's something that, hits home as a riding that's one of the most diverse ridings in the entire country, where we have Sikhs, Muslims, Hindus, and Tamils living in such harmony in Canada. It's really hard to sometimes imagine other parts of the world where it is so difficult when it comes to religious conflicts and ethnic conflicts. But that's why the pursuit of justice, although there's been a change of government in Sri Lanka, progress has been slow. But anything worth having doesn't come without a fight. My first interaction with the Tamil community was in 2008 when I was a constituency assistant for a member of parliament. And I would always applaud the community for the peaceful protests that they held downtown Toronto. And I've seen your community grow in front of my eyes, and how well you've become activists and members of parliament and organized in your community to raise your issues. So the end, democracy always works best when people have an opportunity to talk to their leaders. So on behalf of all of us, always know that your MPs are here to serve. And if we can ever be of any help, please don't hesitate to contact us. Thank you so much.
And I'm very honored to be among you, people who remember and people who are very, very clear in their wish for justice. I have a significant Tamil community in my riding of London Fanshawe, and in 2008 they came to me with pictures and stories and the plea that the Government of Canada finally do something to recognize what was happening to their families. They were desperate because of what was happening in Sri Lanka, in Jaffna, to their families. And while those pleas were not acknowledged, I think the fact that we're here today speaks volume of community, volumes about the spirit and the determination of community. In March, I was in Sri Lanka, and I can tell you that what you've heard today about the slowness of justice, the inability or the reluctance of government to bring to justice those who committed the atrocities is very real, as is the slowness of the return of land to people who were deprived of their livelihood, as is the slowness of making the effort to draw the country together. And so we have to encourage them, and we have to be very clear as Canadians that we expect the Government of Canada to do what must be done, and be very, very clear in the message that the Government of Sri Lanka must honor its UN obligations. And finally, I met with my Sri Lankan Tamil community members just about 3 weeks ago, and they said, we understand that things are slow, but be very clear that we want economic justice for our families, for the people of Sri Lanka, for those who live in the northern province. And please tell our government that they must encourage that justice and be full force behind that justice. And so that's our job here. Thank you very much for inviting me, for allowing me to be here with you today.
As you reflect on almost 8 years, it'll be 8 years on May 18th since the end of the 26-year civil war in Sri Lanka, and the Tamil people suffered terribly. Atrocities that are very difficult for us to imagine. And as well, we see that there's a change in government. Accountability is absolutely critical. And I see Gary there, Gary who was instrumental in helping create the Canadian Tamil Parliamentary Friendship Association, which I'm pleased to work on with him to make sure that there is accountability and there is justice for all of those that suffered so terribly over that long period. So again, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I know my colleague Omar Alcabra is here as well. I'm sure you'll hear from other colleagues. We look forward to working with you for justice. Thank you.
MP Ruby Sahota.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out here today to Parliament Hill. And I know that a few organizations have come out from time to time here on the Hill to try to spread awareness about the cause, about the genocide that did happen in Sri Lanka, and know that it's been discussed quite a lot with me and my colleagues. It's an issue that comes up in my hometown of Brampton quite a bit too, with the community there. I've met with a lot of local leaders, and I'm very sympathetic to the cause. I know what it's like coming from a community myself where we have in the past had human rights violations. And honestly speaking, the very reason I got into this job is because I've always been very passionate about human rights growing up, and because of all the incidents that I heard of. And that's what really urged me and made that desire grow deeper inside of me to do something about it. So I became a lawyer, and I thought that I was going to do human rights work when I became a lawyer, but I didn't get that opportunity. So once I got this opportunity, I did promise myself that I'd come into politics and try to leave it, the world a better place with my time here. And this is exactly the types of causes I would like to help work on with you. So please don't ever hesitate to approach me, because it really is my major passion, and I'd love to talk more about what we can do working forward in order to make it right again. I know we can't change the past, but I know that there's a lot of there's still a need for justice, and I will work with you on that. Thank you.
Next up, I'd like to call upon MP Garnet Jenis. He's a member of the Conservative Party in Alberta.
Thank you. I'm sorry I'm jumping the line a bit ahead of some of my fellow MPs here, but I've got another event that I'm going to, so I appreciate the opportunity to just briefly thank all of you for being here on Parliament Hill and for your advocacy. We know that it's been 8 years since the end of the Civil War in Sri Lanka, and progress in terms of the calls for meaningful, independent judicial mechanisms to investigate crimes, calls for the proper study of those things and for justice. We've seen virtually no progress recently on these issues. And it is so important that Canada be a strong voice for international human rights, be a strong voice on behalf of persecuted minorities, religious and ethnic minorities around the world. And I was proud of the leadership that Canada showed in 2013 when the Canadian government decided that we would boycott the Commonwealth Summit happening in Sri Lanka in order to build international pressure for real justice in response to what happened. And 4 years on from that point, we need to continue this work, and I know there are many members of Parliament who are seized with these issues. I made a statement in the House yesterday continuing that call, and it's encouraging to see so many of my colleagues here again. So thank you for being here, and let's keep up the fight.
Next, I'd like to call upon Liberal MP Sonia Sidhu.
Thank you for being here when we all voting inside, and thank you being come on the Hill today. And what happened 26 years ago, we are remembering the victims today, and our Prime Minister, our government stands with the Tamil community. And I have a big Tamil community in my riding, and we always support the Tamil community. And I know progress is going very slow, but we all stand with you. And thank you for coming today.
So next, I'd like to call upon MP Omar Alghabra.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. It's good to be with you here. Today we're commemorating the 8th year anniversary of the end of the conflict, the military conflict. But while the military conflict has ended, there are still unresolved issues. I was at Geneva at the United Nations Human Rights Council last month to speak on behalf of Canada on a resolution that reminds the Sri Lankan government that there's still a lot of work incomplete, unfinished. We still need accountability, we still need reconciliation, and we need people who committed wars or crimes against humanity and genocide to be held accountable. And we are asking the Sri Lankan government to complete that work. And I want to take this opportunity as well to relate something to you as someone who has Syrian background. As I watch what's happening in Syria today, I can't imagine the suffering and the pain that many Sri Lankans, particularly Tamils, went through. That is why we as Canadians need to be a voice for holding people responsible for crimes accountable. So our government will continue to do that, making sure that Canadian voice is heard internationally and globally, and that the Sri Lankan government is reminded of its responsibility, not only to its citizens, but to its international obligations. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Next, I'd like to call upon MP Arnold Bierson of Northern Alberta.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here on this occasion, the anniversary of the anniversary of the end of the Civil War in Sri Lanka and the horrible situation that the Tamils have found themselves in. I'd like to just read a short statement on behalf of the leadership candidate from the Conservative Party that I'm supporting, Andrew Scheer. Andrew Scheer, on behalf of him. During the month of May, we pause to reflect on the 8th anniversary of the end of the decades-long civil war in Sri Lanka and honor the tens of thousands who lost their lives and were displaced from their homes. It is very important to remember the victims of the Sri Lankan Civil War and to continue to ask for accountability from the Sri Lankan government. Regrettably, no one has been held responsible for these atrocities, and the Tamils have been left alone to seek truth and justice. I strongly urge that these allegations of serious human rights abuses and claims of over 40,000 Tamil civilians that were killed by the Sri Lankan troops in the final phases be investigated so the victims' families can have closure. Once elected the leader of the Conservative Party, I will urge the Sri Lankan government to actively pursue reconciliation with the Tamil community, and I will stand shoulder to shoulder with the Canadian Tamil community in order to seek justice for the victims of these atrocities and champion human rights. Thank you very much.
Next, I'd like to call upon MP Peter Fonseca. He's from the riding of Mississauga East, Cooksville.
Thank you very much, and we're here to remember those that have, some that have lost their lives, families that have been displaced, people that have been hurt on this 8th year anniversary of that Civil War, and as we commemorate and think about all those that have suffered and are still suffering here in our community. There has not been that closure. We need accountability, and that is what our government has been pressing for. We have a wonderful Tamil community here in Canada and across the world. But I can say that we feel for you. We love you. You give back so much in every way to our community, and we thank you for being so strong. And we need to be strong for you. So we are glad that you are here, and we will always remember. We will never forget, and we must work again to get accountability for all the people that have been hurt, displaced, killed by this conflict. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to call upon Liberal Member of Parliament for Scarborough Centre, Selma Zahid.
Wanakam, good evening. It's my honor to be here to stand in solidarity with the victims of the war in Sri Lanka. I know on May 18th we will commemorate the 8th anniversary of the end of the civil war in Sri Lanka, and we all stand in solidarity with all the victims and all those people who lost their loved ones in that war. But I know a lot of work has to be done. There needs to be accountability and closure. So we will continue working with the Tamil community here and with the Sri Lankan government to make sure that people who lost their lives, we can hold the other people accountable. So it's really honor for me to represent a strong Tamil community from Scarborough Centre, and to have a very close relationship with all the Tamil community. Nandrik.
Next, I'd like to call upon Member of Parliament for the riding of Scarborough North, MP Sean Chen.
Thank you very much and welcome. Nandri Vanakam. I'm incredibly honored to join you tonight for this commemoration, the 8th anniversary of the end of the Civil War, and I welcome you to Ottawa. I know that in my riding of Scarborough North there are so many Tamil Canadians, and from speaking to them, from knowing them, from being their friends, I know the pain and the hurt of this Sri Lankan Civil War is enduring. I know that it affects the Tamil diaspora in Canada. I know that it continues to affect the generations to come. It's so important that we remember and that we educate, which is why I want to thank NCCT for their work to advocate on this issue, to ensure that education, as you can see in the boards behind me, continues to play an important role, because never can we have such atrocities committed against humanity. So thank you to NCCT. I'm truly honored to join you for this commemoration, and I thank you all for being here this evening. Nandri Vanakam.
Next, I'd like to call upon for the Liberal riding Markham Thornhill, MP Mary Ng.
Good evening. Thank you, everybody, and welcome to Ottawa. As many of my colleagues have welcomed you, I welcome you as well. I have a wonderful community of Tamil Canadians in my riding, and I've certainly heard from many community members, about the hardships and of the war in Sri Lanka. And I stand, with our government and the work that we will do to work to bring about accountability. That is really important work, and I look forward to working with my colleagues and with this government on that. And to the members of the Sri Lankan community, know that we stand with you and welcome here. And As you know, as my colleague says, education is incredibly important, and this is a front that we will need to make progress on. Thank you very much, and for allowing me to say a few words to you tonight. Thank you.
Kelly Leach, candidate for the leadership of Conservative Party of Canada, released the following statement recognizing Tamil Genocide Month. Kelly Leach reiterated her support for an inquiry into the genocide against Tamils in Sri Lanka, echoing the statement of former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Leach believes that the current reconciliation plans by the government of Sri Lanka may not provide any meaningful results, and it is imperative that the government set up a hybrid court and that the Canadian judges, professors, lawyers, and prosecutors can play a meaningful role in setting this up and making the process credible. Our former Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Brian Mulroney, ensured that hundreds of thousands of Tamils were able to resettle in Canada to escape from persecution in the 1980s. I am so fortunate to count that many of these families as close personal friends today. The Tamil community will always have a friend in myself. As Prime Minister of Canada, I was always champion human rights. Next, we have Divya Prabhakaran speaking on behalf of Tamil Youth Organization.
Anevarukkum vanakkam. Welcome everyone. I would like to thank you all for coming here today. We have gathered here to mark the 8th year of the Mullawaikal massacre. The war is not over. As a Canadian Tamil diaspora youth, I promise to continue to fight for our people in any way that I can, and I encourage all the youth here in Montreal, in Ottawa, to continue to do the same. Thank you very much, and thank you for this opportunity.
Tamil Association Board of Director Ranjan Punyamurthy to make a brief statement.
Thank you for this attendance. We have to remember what happened was in 2009. Dear brothers, sisters, and children, it has been 8 years gone by. UN elimination, estimate more than 40,000 innocent Tamils were killed, thousands were injured, and hundreds of thousands innocent Tamil civilians were placed in a concentrated camp in war-torn Mullawaikal Valley in Sri Lanka. This was happening during the year 2009. The new government was formed in 2015 and promised to do everything to bring the war crimes and crimes against humanity culprits under trial and release all political prisoners. The international leaders supported this new Sri Lankan government and expected something constructively was going to happen in the near future. Unfortunately, as expected by Tamils in Sri Lanka, nothing was done for justice, and the Sri Lankan simply trying to get these aids from abroad and buying more time. They continue to eliminate Tamil nation and identity from Sri Lanka. Very recently, March 2017, the Sri Lankan government successfully deceived the international community, the human rights activists, and obtained 2 more years. The Sri Lankan government immediately broke their promises to bringing international investigation and setting up hybrid court. So they abandoned almost nowadays. As you all know, the Canadian political parties united and raised their voice for human rights and justice for Tamils. However, nothing tangible happened so far. Dear friends, do you know what's going on, what's happening in Sri Lanka? There are 4 main concerns we have it in mind. the number of military camps in the north and east still occupy the Tamil lands. The displaced Tamil people still could not settle on their own land. Circulation of illegal drugs and alcohol among Tamil youths is systematically increased to damage their culture. War widows is a very pathetic situation. War widows not know their better halves alive or not, who are still in prison without inquiry for a long time. Every day they are mentally and physically in pain. On the behalf of peace-loving Tamil Canadian citizens, the Ottawa Tamil Association is urgently requesting Canadian government and all opposition parties to make an active role to prevent further genocide of Tamils in Sri Lanka in this modern era. Thank you very much.
Next, I'd like to call upon Director of National Council of Canadian Tamils, Pamela Kadiswaran. Should be making a brief statement.
To understand the context and history of the Tamil nation in the island of Ceylon, let us look at a quote by Sir Hugh Clayhorn, who was the first British colonial secretary to Ceylon. He wrote in his minutes to His Majesty's government in 1796 that two different nations from a very ancient period have divided between them in possession of the island Ceylon. First, the Sinhalese inhabiting the interior of the country in the southern and western parts, and the Tamils who possess the northern and eastern districts. These two nations differ entirely in their religion, language, and manners. The Dutch and the Portuguese, who were colonial rulers before the British, did keep them separate nations, but the British amalgamated these very different nations in 1833 for administrative purposes. Based on this historical oversight, it will be a fatal mistake if the international community tries to approach the long-burning ethnic crisis between the two nations residing in Ceylon on the false grounds of an internal problem of a sovereign state. Instead, this crisis involves two nations, Tamilulam and Sri Lanka, which were brought together by the British only 176 years ago. On leaving the island in 1948, the departing British handed over the whole country to the numerically larger Sinhalese population, which continues to pass laws that aided the genocide of the Tamils. This month, we mark 8 years since the Mullaibaikkal massacre, where UN estimated at least 40,000 innocent lives were killed, and an independent estimate suggested more than 75,000 innocent civilians may have been killed. In the last 8 years, UNHRC conducted limited internal investigations into allegations of crimes committed during the war, based on which it requested a full international investigation. Tens of thousands of Tamils have been killed in periodic pogroms against Tamils in the past 69 years, and no one has been charged for these crimes yet. Given that Sri Lanka has continued to destroy the Tamil nation with impunity for the past 7 decades, an international investigation is needed to stop the ongoing genocide. In February 2015, the Northern Provincial Council in Sri Lanka passed a resolution that demanded a UN inquiry to investigate the genocide of the Tamil people by successive Sri Lankan governments. The systematic genocide of Tamils in Sri Lanka by successive state regimes still continues. State-sponsored pogroms, ethnically marginalized education system, colonizing historical Tamil nation, forceful disappearance of Ulam Tamils, universally prohibited torture camps, and rape as a weapon of suppression are a few genocidal tactics that is carried out by Sri Lanka with impunity. In September 2015, the OISL report clearly mentioned that many of the violations would amount to war crimes and crimes against humanity if established in a court of law. In October 2015, the UNHRC adopted a consensus resolution in which the new Sri Lankan government pledged to undertake many human rights reforms, including many transitional justice mechanisms, such as establishing a hybrid court with foreign judges, prosecutors, and investigators. It is not surprising to us that Sri Lanka has reneged on all of these pledges. The Canadian government has been a very active advocate for Tamils' rights in Sri Lanka since 2009. We thank the Canadian government for their active participation in UNHRC by co-sponsoring previous UN resolutions and standing up for human rights and justice. We also thank our government for boycotting the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Colombo, Sri Lanka, and for targeting the funds to implement basic human rights practice. We also thank all parties who supported the call for investigation of genocide in Sri Lanka. Canada was willing to provide foreign judges, prosecutors, and investigators to set up a hybrid court as outlined in the last UNHRC resolution, which had a due date for implementation ending in March this year. This has now been extended for another 2 years despite the refusal of Sri Lanka to allow foreign judges to enter the country. Despite Canada's efforts and international community's pressure, the Sri Lankan government continues to remain belligerent. There is no tangible progress made in transnational justice, and the Sri Lankan government continues to deny any foreign involvement in the hybrid court in clear violation of the UNHRC resolution it co-sponsored. We urge Canada to take a more active role and to work with the international community to pressure for an international independent judicial inquiry to recognize Tamil genocide and to recognize the right of the Tamil nation to determine their own destiny for a long-lasting peace to prevail in this island. This statement has been stated on May 16, 2017 by the National Council of Canadian Tamils, Brampton Tamil Association, Ottawa Tamil Association, Mississauga Tamil Association, Quebec Tamil Development Association, Markham Tamil Organization, Canadian Tamil Youth Alliance, and Tamil Youth Organization.
Next, I'd like to call upon Professor Sriranjan here, who is also a chairperson of National Council of Canadian Tamils. He's going to make the closing closing remark.
Thank you very much for everyone being here. We are gathered here to remember the victims of the Mullawaikal massacre of 2009, May 18th. But the massacre is only the culmination of a long-standing struggle the Tamil people have been facing at the hands of the government of Sri Lanka. We have been suffering periodic pogroms for almost 70 years. From the time the British left, there have been periodic pogroms against the Tamils, and to this day, not a single person has been brought to justice. Not a single person has been brought before justice, and Tamils have never been given compensated for the losses. Tamils have lost billions worth property. Tens of thousands of people have been killed over the years. I personally have lost 2 homes, 1958 and 1977. And 1983, just one day after I left the island, the house from which I left was destroyed. So this is my own story. So like me, there are thousands and thousands of Tamils all over the world who have had personal connection to what has happened in Sri Lanka. If you can imagine, there are, for every one person who left Sri Lanka, there are 3 people remaining back home. For every 4 persons, Tamils living in Sri Lanka, there is 1 army person controlling their life in the north and east. Is this freedom? No. Our people can't live under such oppression. So every one of us has to work hard. I know it is hard because justice is being delayed for so long. But we cannot relent. We have to fight and expose what's going on, and we have to work together and bring out what is the atrocities that is continuing to happen there, and somehow make the international community understand the genocide for what it is. For the young people here, I urge you, please read the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It was proclaimed in 1948 after the Holocaust. And they said never again. That was back in 1948. 69 years later, we are still talking about never again. We must act. And if you read the 30 articles in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, you will notice that for the Tamils in Sri Lanka, every one of those articles has been violated. It is our duty as Canadians who are peace-loving and we enjoy the freedom that we enjoy here to highlight what is happening to our brothers and sisters back home in Sri Lanka. So I urge every one of you to work hard, expose what's happening, bring out our story, and expose the genocide for what it is in Sri Lanka. Thank you very much.
So, I'd really like to thank all the MPs that were able to come out after the voting that took place at the Parliament. So, until 7, we'd like to continue holding up our demonstration boards, and whoever comes by, they can engage with us and discuss with us the importance behind the Tamil Genocide Remembrance Day. And please feel free to engage with anyone that you feel like you'd like to discuss what took place 8 years ago and help them understand the importance of our ongoing advocacy towards the struggle that we're going through as a community to bring justice for the Tamils in the north and the east of Ceylon. Thank you, guys.